Welcome to CoinEx, where we learn more. We just released a short video of John MacArthur addressing the question, why does God allow bad things to happen? Or why does God allow evil in the world? And he answered that question from the perspective of God is sovereign and he can do whatever he wants to do. And also that if he did not allow evil or allow bad things to happen in the world, then how could he demonstrate his righteousness and goodness? And so let's look at that answer to that question in a little more detail. There are various ways of addressing this question, but this is likely the most accurate way of addressing the question, the way that John MacArthur addressed it. But I'm going to kind of take it a little bit deeper, not necessarily from a biblical perspective, but just from the perspective of explaining a little bit more that idea of God cannot demonstrate his righteousness unless there is evil and bad in the world. This stems from the fact that we live in an existence that is dualistic, meaning that there can't be an up unless there is a down, because if there's no down, then how do you know which way is up? There can't be a right unless there's a left, because if there's no left, then how do you know where right is? There can't be right unless there's wrong, because without wrong, how do you know what right is? This is duality. And this world that we live in is a world of duality. And biblically speaking, we can take that back to the Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve, before eating from the fruit of the knowledge of the difference of good and evil, did not live a dualistic existence, or at least that's the way it seems. They did not know the existence of bad or evil. They were just in a state of perfect bliss. But after they disobeyed God and ate from the tree of the knowledge of the difference between good and evil, they now knew duality. They knew the difference between good and bad. And so whether that's the way the duality came into existence or not, we don't know, but we certainly know that that's how it came into existence for Adam and Eve and for their descendants. And it's unfortunate that we must experience this life that includes so much bad and so much evil. But on the flip side of that, if there wasn't all the bad and evil, then we would not know the joy and grace of God. So we do have to suffer the bad, but then by virtue of the bad existing, we also get to enjoy the good of God, the goodness of God, the grace of God, the joy of God, the forgiveness of God. If we could not sin, then we could not know the joy of his forgiveness and his grace. But then we also can rejoice in the idea that when we leave this world and we return to our home with the Father, that we will once again be in a place that is not dualistic, a place where there is no bad and no evil. It will be a place of eternal peace and joy and goodness. So while we are here, we endure the badness But at the same time, we also get to enjoy the goodness of God in this world, even though it's just moments of enjoyment of His goodness and His grace. And it seems like we have to endure the badness and evilness of this world much more of the day than we get to enjoy the goodness of God. But that is just a matter of perspective. A person can learn to be in a state of God's grace and joy most of the time, rather than having their mind focused on all of the bad that they're experiencing and seeing and living through as they move through their day. So while we are in this dualistic world, what we need to do is learn to keep our minds and our hearts and our spirits in the goodness of God all day. And even when we see the bad or experience the bad, if we remain within God's grace, then perhaps there will not be the kind of suffering in those times of bad as those people who are not enjoying God's grace in those moments. There's a book by a psychiatrist named Viktor Frankl. The book is called Man's Search for Meaning. He was a Jewish boy during World War II, and he and his family went to the concentration camps. And he saw all of the horrific evil that existed there. And he found it interesting that certain of the rabbis were able to maintain a state of peace and joy amongst the horrific suffering and evil that was going on around them. And he never could understand how that was possible. And by the grace of God, he survived the camps. And after the war, he moved to the United States and grew up and went to medical school and became a psychiatrist and spent his life trying to understand what it was that he witnessed. How did those rabbis maintain God's peace while they were surrounded by the most horrific evil in existence in this life? And he studied that and thought about it, and he wrote a book about it. And it's something that really would be a good read for anyone. Again, it's Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. So we know that righteous people can remain in God's grace and maintain God's joy and peace even during hardship. And so while we are here in this dualistic world where there is so much bad and evil, we have to cultivate the ability to remain in God's grace and His peace and His joy, no matter what the circumstances. And in addition to that, we have the hope and the knowledge that when we leave this world, we will leave all the bad and the evil behind. I hope that this was helpful, and we will see you next time on CoinX, where you learn more.